just welcome everyone, and before I introduce our panel over there as well, I just want to say thank you very much to the stands who've set up this evening, and that's connected Kingston. There's Health Watch, Marie Curie, Princess Alice, and also Diabetes UK. So thank you very much for coming along tonight. My name is Naz Giovanni. I'm a local GP down in New Malden, and I've been CCG chair now for 7 years. And this is now our Kingston CCG AGM tonight. So welcome. I'm going to get the panel to introduce themselves in a minute, but I just want to just go through some housekeeping rules, if that's okay. Green signs, fire exits, down the stairs, out the main entrance, toilets left and also right down the bottom, and it's well signposted. We are going to be filming, live streaming the AGM today, and also we're going to be publishing the AGM on our website, and this is just to make sure that we sorry, it's just to make sure that we continue with our openness and transparency and record keeping, and to make sure that information is available freely. The panel are going to be videoed tonight, and if you do have any questions in the Q&A session at the end of the AGM, your questions and answers will actually be published on the website, but the cameras will be focusing on the panel members themselves. So, can I just get you guys to introduce yourselves, if that's okay?
I'm Neil Ferrelly. I'm the Local Director of Finance for Kingston CCG and also for Richmond CCG.
I'm Sarah Blow, and I'm the Accountable Officer for the South West London Alliance of CCGs.
I'm Tonya Michaelides. I'm Managing Director for Kingston and Richmond CCGs.
So thank you. So I'm going to try and keep us to time tonight. So initially, I'm going to just go through some demographics for our Kingston population, and also some of the performance metrics that we have achieved this last year. And then I'm going to hand over to Neil to talk about the finance, Sarah, who's going to look at the review of the year, and Tonya, who's also going to look at the Kingston Local Health and Care Plan. We are going to ask the Compassionate Communities, so Zoe Amir, to be able to present to us on Compassionate Communities in Kingston, and then we'll have a Q&A time at the end of the presentation. So if I can just come to Kingston itself, and actually not much has changed around the demographics of Kingston, although there are a few areas where we do need to be a little bit concerned about. So essentially, Kingston is a healthy population. Life expectancy is above the national average for males and females, but we still have deprived areas in Kingston, and so the life expectancy of our population in the deprived areas is a lot lower than the non-deprived areas. We do have an ageing population, and with this comes challenges of caring for increased numbers of patients with complex medical conditions and people with long-term conditions. We're also seeing a growth in number of children, young people who live and also study in Kingston. So our community in Kingston, so essentially we're 21 GP practices. We've got a budget of 266 million. We've got a registered population of just over 210,000, but an actual population of the borough of about 180,000. So the registered patients actually cross boundaries, so they're actually just slightly outside the borough itself, but the residents within the borough of Kingston are about 180,000. We've got almost a third BME population. Now this is a really small slide, so I do apologise, but I do think that you've got some details in packs. Essentially, this slide looks at our 3 levels that we've been looking at to try and improve the health and well-being of our population. The 3 levels are start well, live well, and age well. Now, within start well, if I just go through a few bits of the demographics, So we've got around about a quarter of the population who are children, and we've got around about 12% of 0 to 5-year-olds who live in income-deprived households. Now, that is a lot lower than the London average. The London average is around about 24%. We've got just over 2,700 children who require special educational needs. And on the obesity and the overweight scale, we've got about 15% of 4 to 5-year-olds who are classified as overweight. And by the age of 10 to 11, that rises up to 29%. And around about 1 in 200 children between the ages of 15 and 19 self-harm. And this is quite a high figure compared to other areas. When we look at Live Well, we've got around about 2/3 of our population are between the ages of 18 and 65. As I said, about 1/3 of them are a BME population. We've got more than 1 in 7 of our residents, ages 25 to 65, who are actually providing around about 50 hours of unpaid care per week. At this sort of level, on Live Well, the overweight and obesity reaches to half the population now. So going from 15% to 30% when you're 10 or 11, up to 50% when you're between 18 and 60. We've got around about 5% of our population are diagnosed with diabetics, but we know there is a larger population cohort of diabetics out there, and so we've still got to look for the undiagnosed diabetics in our population. We also have a high population of learning disabilities of some type. In Age Well, so we're talking about the population over the age of 65. We've got 1 in 14 have some kind of have been diagnosed with dementia. We have around about 23,000 population over the age of 65, and we have around about 8,700 of people who actually live alone in our borough. We do also have a population of patients who have been diagnosed with depression, and this reaches up to 40% when they're in care homes. So if we look at the performance in the improvement and assessment framework from NHS England, we've been rated as good, but there are some areas that we still need to really work on. Mental health has been rated as good. Learning disabilities does require improvement, and quite a lot of this is around physical health checks for learning disabilities. Dementia is rated good. Diabetes requires improvement. And again, that's mainly around structured educational needs for newly diagnosed diabetics. Against other targets, I think Kingston Trust has done very well on the cancer waiting times and have achieved 9 targets through the year. Referral to treatment, which is the 18-week waiting time, has been achieved, and also the diagnostic waits of 6 weeks has been achieved from the Trust. The A&E performance does tend to still have a cause for concern, although we are working on it across a whole wide range of partnerships, across the primary community, the Trust and the CCG, trying to work together to try and improve that performance. We've managed to meet our improving access to psychological therapies, and we've also found that the Trust Friends and Family Test has shown excellent outcomes in the inpatient, outpatient, maternity, A&E, and community care. So there are key areas of improvement. I did explain about the area around the A&E target, which we're still working on, which is the 4-hour wait, and also the proportion of people diagnosed with dementia. We have only diagnosed around about 61% up until the point that this report was produced, although we have managed to increase the diagnostic rates. Now, the Reason why we want to increase the diagnostic rates is actually to identify that population cohort so we can actually provide the services that are required for the patients in need. We also need to look at providing enough psychological therapy support for patients with long-term conditions and also people from BME backgrounds. We've also, as I said before, we've got to work to increase the numbers of patients with newly diagnosed diabetes who are receiving structured educational programs to try and help manage the condition. So that's a really brief overview. What I'm going to do is pass on to Neil to talk about the finances of Kingston CCG. And if you can note any questions that you've got and just keep them till the end, and then we can go through that towards the end.
Thank you. So if we could just move on to the... There you go. So Kingston CCG, I'm pleased to say, met the three main financial targets last year. We managed to stick within our control total. We ended up publishing a surplus of just over 1,084,000 for our position. We were audited by our external auditors, and they gave us a clean bill of health for ensuring value for money as well. And one of the other measures, we stayed within our running cost allowance. The CCG is given £4.3 million to stay within, and we met that target as well. I've got another slide that goes into a bit more detail on that. The accounts were approved by the audit committee in May, and if you want further information, the accounts are available on our website if you want to delve into it even more. Okay, so how much did we spend and how did we apply it? So last year we spent 266 million in the CCG. Just to put that into context, Disney spent roughly that amount making the last Star Wars movie, so that just shows you what we could have done with it. So we have a population of just over 200,000, so that works out at £1,330 per head. You can see the blue quadrant there. The bulk of our spend, 52% of it went on acute care. We have contracts with a number of, obviously, Kingston Hospital, but also other providers, not just in South West London, but we obviously have spend in other tertiary areas into London and beyond. The other two main areas of spend, the next one round is the mental health and learning disabilities. We spent 9% of that 266 million on mental health. We were required and we were very keen to increase our investment in mental health services. And part of our audit is just to provide reassurance that that's what we have actually done in this financial year. So we're now putting 9% of our resources into mental health. And then the green segment is around continuing healthcare, which is where we provide continuing care packages for individuals, mainly in homes or residential homes. So of our average £1,330, we spend an awful lot on those high-cost packages for certain individuals where their care requires us to provide custom designed packages of care to meet those individual needs. The other two main segments there, the sort of amber area is the primary care spend, which we had last year. We spent 12% on primary care and 8% on prescribing. So every time a resident of Kingston who's on our list has a prescription from a pharmacist, we end up some weeks later getting a bill for that prescription. Now let's go on. So as I talked before about running costs, as I said, we were permitted to spend 4.3 million on running costs. We actually undershot that by just over 500,000. So of our £1,330 per head, we only spent £18 per head, or £19 per head, on our running costs for the CCG. And then the final thing, there you go, you're doing well with this. So we've had quite a few challenges, as you can imagine. I think the main things that were a pressure for last year, we had increasing activity in the hospitals to manage. We also had a very small number of high-cost children's placements, which increased throughout last year. So those are major pressures for us. We managed these cost pressures through a lot of joint working with our partners. And this financial year, again, we've got another fairly challenging plan, but we're continuing to develop our working arrangements with our partners in order to try and manage the financial position. We've submitted a plan based on us delivering to balance, and I'm happy to say, as at month 5, we're still on course to deliver that plan. Thanks.
Just take that off of there. Okay, is that on? Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Talking about Star Wars, I've just noticed that we've got a couple of Jedi down here on the corner. I don't know if anyone else noticed that. I didn't know if that was Neil. You've been at the slides there. So 2 years I've been, this is my second 2.5 years, but a second AGM that I've had at Kingston, and I have the honour of talking to you about some of the positive work that we've been doing over the last year, which I think is, and there's quite a lot of slides, and I haven't got very long, and the reason we've got quite a lot of slides is because we're doing some really good work in Kingston. So the first one is around primary care, and I think there are two big things. One is that we've got 8 to 8 primary care coverage across the whole of Kingston. I'm sure that we could get that used more, and I'm sure that we can do more of that going forwards, but actually 7 days a week, 8 to 8 coverage across the whole of Kingston through 3 GP hubs in Kingston, so that's very positive. Primary care networks are the model for the future of working with primary care, working with community services, mental health services around communities. And we have set up 5 primary care networks in Kingston, led by local clinical directors who are local GPs. And they have now been up and running since July, and they'll be starting to look at their populations, understand their populations, and start to build services and work with all the partners to make sure that we deliver a really robust and high quality service for our populations at a local level. Special educational needs. So some people may be surprised to see this one because we did actually have an assessment with the council, and it wasn't the best assessment, and we actually received a statement of action, a written statement of action that meant that we had to do a lot more work. But the positive part of that for this year is that we have done a lot of work, and we've worked really closely with the local authority, but also with schools and with parents and with the voluntary sector. And in fact, we had a conference, a futures conference in June. It had over 300 people attend. And what we did was that helped us to develop the plan, making sure that we've got the right designated doctors and people supporting children with special educational needs, but making sure that what we can do now is to have a full plan that can be assessed as good going forward. So we will be finalising our plan and our performance dashboard and our KPIs together with the council, and that will be published. So children and young people's mental health and wellbeing, another area where we've got some really positive news. We did some work on this across South West London, and Naz mentioned that self-harm was a particular issue. That's a particular issue across the whole of South West London, and we did a piece of work to develop a children and young people's model that is based around school, called a whole schools approach, where we work with groups of schools. And in first wave last year, we did get a lot of money for Merton, Sutton and Wandsworth CCGs, and this year we received additional money in Wave 2 Trailblazer for Richmond, Kingston and Croydon, which means that the work that we'd already started to do with schools can now be increased. And what we're doing, we're putting teams, mental health teams around those schools, and they are working together to look at things like apps to support children, working with teachers to supply training and resources, working with families to make sure that they've got the right level of support. So we are doing that together, and we hope to roll that out to all schools across South West London. But this year we will be rolling out some of that into around 15% of schools across South West London at the moment, but the whole of 50% of pupils, we think, across the whole of South West London by the end of this year will have coverage of this model, which I think is really, really positive. So adult mental health services, a lot going on. I'm not going to talk about a lot, but I'm just going to mention the specialist personality disorders service, which we have not yet started, but will be starting in April. But this was some work that was done by Healthwatch in Kingston, where they identified that we had a gap. And we actually have a very high number of people with personality disorders that require support, but we didn't have a service that we could deliver to them. So based on the work that Kingston Healthwatch did, we have developed a service which will be going live in April next year. So that's a really positive move, and based on work that we've done with our partners. So something for us to look forward to next year. MSK, musculoskeletal services. Again, we have a service model for South West London, and we've implemented that in Kingston. And what that has meant is that people can be referred into this service rather than see their GP, who may not be the most appropriate person, or be sent to the hospital if that's not where they need to be seen. So they can be seen quickly. They can get advice from a therapist, they can get some support. And there's been an additional 700 Kingston referrals gone into the MSK service this year. So that's a very positive outcome for those people, because they'll be seen quickly, they'll be assessed, they'll get the right level of support that they need. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the proposal to merge the South West London CCGs. We have, over the last few years, been working very closely together in South West London. We have achieved a lot together. So I talked about children, young people, mental health, talked about MSK services. Where we work together, where we need to work together, we've done very well. But what we also do is recognise the real importance of working at a local level with local authorities and our partners. So we've developed a model across South West London that means that we can merge the CCGs whilst retaining a real focus on a local borough level. So our intent is to have a local committee working with local authorities, providers at a borough level, while still having a South West London CCG. That allows us to make the level of management cost reductions that we need to do, but also it's the direction of travel for the national, and it's set out in the long-term plan that there'll be a reduction in CCGs at the footprint of something like South West London. So we're delivering our ambitions around delivery of services, but what we also want to do is make sure that the infrastructure that we've got supports delivery going forwards. So we will be putting an application in at the end of September to merge all of the CCGs across South West London for April next year, and we're happy to talk to people about that, but we've been through governing bodies and we'll be signing off the final application next week. Okay, Tonya.
Thank you, Sarah. You'd be pleased to know I'm not standing up because I'm not going to speak for very long.
Oh, I think that's very nice.
We're going to show a film. So I'd just like to introduce the health and care plan for Kingston. We've been developing our health and care plan with partners over the last year, and hopefully, if you haven't been involved directly, you would have heard about our health and care plan. It would take me for all the rest of this today to list all the people who have been involved, but I'd like to thank people for their commitment and their time to producing our health and care plan. We now do have physical copy. We don't have enough for everyone, but we're going to get copies out, so we do have a copy now. So please, if you haven't seen it, there are copies around. And we've produced a short film that really starts to hopefully explain our ambition and our plan. I'd like to thank everyone who's also made the film in quite a short time span, so that's great. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy our film, but if there's any questions afterwards, the panel, we'll do it in the panel time. So shall we roll the film then? Roll the film.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We make a real big difference. You know that because that's what people tell us. And actually, we're adding it to life.
We encourage you to do as much as you can. This plan is about our local NHS, the council, voluntary sector and the community sector working as a whole system to improve health and care together. Our plan identifies priorities and actions for the children of our borough to start well, for adults to live well and for people to age well. We've also identified actions to take so that carers are supported and for prevention to be championed across all ages. These actions have been endorsed by local people, the voluntary community sector and professionals across the health and care system.
I am a huge fan of the Daily Mile. It's a fantastic national initiative that aims to get more children out of the classroom and walking, jogging or running for 15 minutes a day. We know that nationally about a third of children are overweight, and that's a local issue for us too. That's why our local health and care plan has a specific priority about reducing childhood obesity. We know that the Daily Mile has huge benefits. It helps children become fitter, helps them to maintain a healthy weight, and it also boosts their concentration in the classroom too. That's why I am a huge fan of the Daily Mile, and I'm so pleased that schools in our borough are contributing towards it.
Youth Out Loud is a targeted group with 13 to 17-year-olds from both Richmond and Kingston boroughs.
We are you. Out loud! I joined Youth Out Loud because I'm very passionate about changing and possibly learning more about the way health system works in our local area.
Rather I improve than just not knowing anything and hoping that something happens.
It felt really good that we were given a voice in this project because we feel like young people need to be listened to in all aspects that affect them, especially ones around their health.
Youth Out Loud is also involved in the Digital Youth Project, which is running in both Kingston and Richmond boroughs. We're working with children to make some films to help young people find information they can decide closer to for various mental health issues such as self-harm.
Connected Kingston is our system-wide approach to social prescribing. We've been working in partnership with our local partners in Kingston and local communities to develop community champions who are our workforce, who have positive conversations with people about changing their behaviours or enabling them to link with their local communities to help them to be socially connected.
About a third of people are possibly going to the GP when the root of their ill health or malaise is actually a social reason. And the GP in their consultation time isn't always able to address those issues. They can address very well with medical issues. So it's really giving people some support to have some time to express those needs and those concerns, and then some support to access things in the community that can help them.
One of the priorities of the Kingston Health and Care plan is to make sure people with a learning disability have the same opportunities as everybody else. It's really important for people with learning disabilities to get their own health check with their GP, because sometimes people with learning disabilities have more complex health needs than other people. So having an annual health check, you can pick up any issues before they become a problem.
It's really important that things like the Kingston Health and Care Plan addresses things like loneliness, because it's a huge issue here in Kingston, as it is everywhere else. We know for a fact that people being lonely really affects their health. We've done lots of initiatives around isolation and loneliness. Here we're sat inside running out. We find that people enjoy the days here, they come here because they choose to come here, and we make a real big difference. We know that because that's what people tell us.
I recently come to Granny House, and because I was broken my arm and I can't move, I have been having carer, although they're coming every morning, now for me. I'm joy to come to run the house because you meet people and then you've got a lot of things to do in your brain to do.
I came to the day centre on the advice of my doctor because I was very low-spirited following the death of my wife because we were very close. I suppose this happens to lots of people when they lose someone. I was so lonely, I couldn't believe you could be so lonely. As soon as I get through that front door, I start to get a lift. It floods out of me and I can feel similar to like someone is going to love me, to greet me with lots of love. I blossom, I actually feel great, and I start making jokes with the staff and everything. That's what I have, and that's what I've noticed here. I hope everybody feels the same. The staff are fantastic.
Prevention needs to be across the life course, starting well from babies through to the age of 19, living well for adults and ageing well for older people, enabling people to access the services that they need when they need them, smoking cessation, stopping smoking, helping people to reduce the amount of alcohol they drink, eating healthily and maintaining a healthy weight, and keeping physically active.
Kingston Carers Network is an organisation that supports unpaid carers in Kingston. Carers should be a priority because they save the economy so much. They've got to contribute about £200 million worth of care each year. So without carers, we just couldn't manage. There are a number of challenges for carers. Some of the carers have to reduce the amount of work they do. If we're looking at young carers, they're more likely to have emotional health problems. We need to make sure every carer is aware of services, where they can get support, what their rights are. Carers need to know that they are partners in that care.
We hope now you don't hear this or as a cat pack. You can read more about it on our website.
Better than Star Wars, yeah. That's brilliant. Yeah, thanks to everyone who actually put that film together, and all to the people who were actually in the film as well. So I'm going to hand over to Zoe Byrne and Mia Patterson from Princess Alice to look at and to talk about nurturing compassionate communities in Kingston. So do you want to join us? Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. Turn it off.
Lovely, thank you, and thank you for having us tonight. I'm Zoe Byrne. I'm Director of People and Communities at Princess Alice Hospice. Hopefully many of you are aware of the work of the hospice. We are based in Esher, where we have an inpatient unit with 24 beds, but actually most of the care that we deliver is out in the community. And at any one time, we're supporting around 800 people in their own homes. That's throughout Kingston as well as Richmond and some of Surrey. And our objective is to reach more people. We want our care to go further. And there are three ways that we're doing that. It's by looking at the clinical care that we offer, the outstanding care, and thinking about how we can do that differently to reach more people, as well as growing our education and research, and particularly working with healthcare partners like staff in care homes to support end-of-life care. The final element of our strategy is around compassionate communities, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today. So what I'll do is just talk to you very briefly about the Princess Alice Hospice vision for a compassionate community, and then I'll hand over to Mia, who'll talk to you about some of the activity we've been doing in Kingston and would like to do. So this is all quite new for us. We're starting out, and we would love to have conversations with people that for whom this resonates, and we might be able to work together. So what makes a compassionate community? Well, we know that communities are made up of organisations, of buildings, of institutions, of community groups, And in all of those are people who are running them, the assets within the community that are doing this. And we know that they're already running loads of stuff. There are coffee mornings at church halls. There are schemes that take people to hospital appointments. There's loads of things going on in Kingston already. So what do Princess Alice Hospice bring to this? Well, the first thing we want to do is talk to people. So we're going to ask these people that are running community groups, that are doing all this stuff already, what is it about your community? Where are the gaps in supporting the people that you help? And even more significantly, we're trying to find these people. And they're the ones who are ill, who are living with life-limiting conditions, people who are caring for those that are, and people who, like the gentleman we just heard from in the video, are recently bereaved. Because we know how much that contributes to difficult situations and to loneliness. So we're asking them, talking to these people about the vision of a compassionate community and saying to them, a compassionate community is a place where everyone accepts that they have a role to play in supporting one another in times of crisis and loss. People are ready, willing and confident to have conversations about living and dying well, and they're willing to support each other in emotional and practical ways. And we paint this picture for people, and then we ask them, what would make your community a compassionate one? What is it that supports you when you're ill, when you're caring for someone who's ill, when you've been bereaved? What was the support that you accessed? Or actually, what would you have wanted, or do you want in those circumstances? So then what we try to do is find somebody like this person up there. So they're already running a community allotment with their organisation, but they're finding that more and more people that are coming to them are ill, are older, are frailer, and they don't quite know how to support them. So we at the hospice would say, let's work together. We can train you as a volunteer around how to support people with life-limiting conditions and their carers, how to help them. And we can work together, have a charter, an agreement that how we'll work together, and we can help you then attract people to your community allotment with us. Similarly, this person over here who's got their coffee morning at the church hall, they're noticing that actually more and more people that are coming are bereaved, and that's why they're wanting this social support. But they don't know how to deal with people that have been recently bereaved. So again, we can offer them training and support. They can set up a bereavement cafe once a month and actually give support to those people that are bereaved and help them to come together with other people that are in a similar position. And that's where we really get that peer support and understanding. Or occasionally, we'll have this person down here, and they're ill, they're caring, they're bereaved, and they tell us that actually there's a real gap. They're one of their few pleasures left in their life is reading, and they would love to join a book club, but there's nothing near them. So we've got the ability to set something up. We have 1,400 volunteers at Princess Alice Hospice. We've got the volunteers, we've got the experience of managing volunteers, and we know that somebody in their local community would want to help them set up a book club and run it together. So actually we are able to set new initiatives up as well, but really want to work in partnership too. So, the other thing that is underpinning our work in compassionate communities is compassionate neighbours. So that's these volunteers up here. Compassionate Neighbours is a social movement that was developed by St Joseph's Hospice in Hackney and has been rolled out across London. It's something we've embraced over the last 18 months. And Compassionate Neighbours are volunteers. They visit people who are ill and lonely in their own home for maybe an hour a week. But actually, unlike other befriending models, this is about real reciprocal relationships. And this is about those volunteers helping those community members integrate back into their community, so taking them to the book club, taking them to the coffee morning, and really supporting them to be part of their local community. We've trained over 120 compassionate neighbours at the hospice across our care area, and it's something that, with the right resource, we'd really like to grow and grow. The other thing that we're doing is getting people talking about death and dying, and we do that through various means, including, that's a bucket, so bucket list events. We're going to fetes and fairs around the area, asking the question, before I die, I'd want to. What thing haven't you done that you would like to do before you die? And that's aimed at anybody, and it's a way of interacting with people and talking about death and dying. We also run death cafes, and this again isn't something we've made up. It's an international social movement around getting people having conversations about death and dying, and I know there's a death cafe coming up in Kingston soon. So to summarise, the Princess Alice Hospice vision of a compassionate community has events to encourage the discussion of death and dying. It has compassionate neighbours. It has people that can offer that practical and emotional support on a one-to-one basis, but also help people to integrate back into their local community. We want to work in partnership with the assets that are already out there and work together to develop social support initiatives for people who are ill, caring and bereaved, as well as potentially setting up our own initiatives. And to keep all of this going and to make it sustainable, we have this group of people, some of them hospice volunteers, some of them volunteers with other organisations, compassionate neighbours, and actually members of the community coming together to keep all this activity going and make it sustainable. And with that, we think the outcome is absolutely increased volunteer-led social support for people who are ill, caring and bereaved. We think this enables people to live well at home and connect with their local community, hopefully therefore reducing their loneliness and isolation, and ultimately reducing the need for clinical support because they're getting a different form of support by increasing their community's ability and confidence to care for them at difficult times. And I'll hand over to Mia to talk about what we've been doing on a local level.
Thank you. So I'm the Compassionate Communities lead. So as Zoe said, I'm the one on the ground, I suppose, doing it. We've chosen 4 places, and one of them was New Malden. But actually, in the work that I've been doing, as I'll explain, that's kind of morphed into the wider Kingston area. So just to... What am I pressing the wrong one? There we go. So as Zoe said, compassionate neighbours, we've got them all over our care area, but these are the figures for Kingston. So we've got 23 compassionate neighbours currently supporting 21 community members. So that's, as Zoe said, going into people's homes for an hour, hour and a half a week, or not, going for a coffee if that's what they choose to do. What we found is fantastic is that someone who perhaps was housebound in a wheelchair is now able to go out and about because they've got the confidence, because a compassionate neighbour has gone with them, and they've been spotted in town on their own doing that, which is, I think, one of the best things that's come out of it. That's, just going back actually, that's us in All Saints Church in Kingston at our celebration in March, where we we had 100 compassionate neighbours who are trained, fully trained and either matched or waiting to be matched. We're way beyond that now, but it was a really lovely celebration. So, as Zoe said, we have a number of events and we've reached over 1,600 people. Death cafes are one of them, and in fact I ran one this morning in Banstead. The feedback is beforehand is always, don't know about the word death, don't know why you're doing that, but the feedback when we're there is always fantastic. We ask people just to informally fill in a little post-it note, and it always says, thank you for the opportunity, for allowing us to talk about a taboo subject, or I'm going to go home and tell my partner what I want. We work in a hospice, and when we have them at the hospice, clinicians write things like, my husband doesn't know what I want, or my wife doesn't know what I want, and it's quite astonishing that it's the one thing that's going to unite us all, but we don't like talking about it. So we also have the Before I Die board at Fates and Fairs. This figure includes all of the other outreach work we've done, so talking to people about what we do at various groups around the care area, but this is just in Kingston, this figure, but also doing schools projects as well. We also have bereavement cafes. Now, throughout the care area, we have 12, but we have 2 in this area. So we have one in New Malden at the Methodist Church on the High Street, and we also have one that's just opened just last week at Kingston Hospital. So they are obviously different death cafes. Death cafes are not for bereaved people, because that's where we talk about anything and everything to do with dying and death, whereas bereavement cafes are for those who have been bereaved. It's a safe place to come and talk to trained volunteers, and in fact it is the model we're working to. It's the perfect model that's happened so far, in that every single bereavement cafe belongs to another organisation, and what we've done is bring our expertise in training the volunteers in bereavement, how to talk to people, how to listen to people, and that's what we're looking to do. So the church volunteers that we train still belong to the Methodist Church. There's a group of volunteers from Kingston Hospital, and that's what all 12 of our cafes, that's the model that we work to. So we have advanced care planning, which you'll all know about, but we have a partnership with Kingston Hospital. So it's the frailty team who are referring people to us. We were able to do this. We've got somebody in post who coordinates this, and that was with funding from Hospice UK, which is fantastic. So it's only just started in the last couple of months, but we are slowly starting to see referrals. We have a cohort of volunteers who've been trained to talk to people about their wishes for the future and actually go into people's houses and spend spend a couple of hours over a period of weeks and very much encouraging them to talk to their friends and family about their wishes as well. But obviously at a time when they're not at the point of coming into the hospice, they're not at the point where everybody's very distressed. It's when people are able to think about this and take time. We are on Connected Kingston, which I think is a fantastic tool. I think every town, every borough should have one. So the Compassionate Neighbours we mentioned, we're now open to referrals there, so people don't just have to get in touch with us themselves. Friends, family and organisations can also refer to them. Our Man Shed, which is another activity we have in our directorate, in community engagement, we've got a Man Shed at the hospice, which actually does have a women's group as well. I do want to make that clear. But it was following the whole, there's men in sheds activity. And also the bereavement cafes are on there too. And as we build up more and more activities in the area, we will add them. So the most important thing is the consultation events. So I do the majority of those. There is somebody else working with me in another town. And it sounds a very fancy word, but I just go to groups. I talk to them, I say what's good about living here, what's not so good, is there anything missing? Is there someone in another town that had a brilliant bereavement service or something that we could replicate here? And it's listening to those people, and then we set things up in partnership, and then we will put them on Connected Kingston, and we will just build up what we're doing in the local area. We started with a New Malden focus, and I've been to, so it's early days, but I've been to a number of meetings. So I've met with the Korean Senior Citizens Group. I've been on the panel at the New Malden Residents Association, the New Malden Rotary are good supporters. Then had a number of meetings here with various people in public health team, which is brilliant, but has made us realise that actually it's wider, and a lot of what we want to do, rather than just focusing on New Malden, it will cover the whole of Kingston. So that's why we're really pleased to come and tell you about this today. So early days, but hopefully next year we'll be able to tell you about 15, 20, 30 activities that are going on and can all be referred to through Connected Kingston too. So that's us. Oh, we want to play the video first, don't we? I think you have to do that, and then we'll take questions if that's okay. I don't know how that... Are you? Yes.
Princess Alice Hospice wants to nurture compassionate communities.
Compassionate communities are places where people care for one another at times of crisis and loss. Communities where people are ready, willing and confident to talk about living and dying well. Communities where people support each other in emotional and practical ways. Each community will be different, and at the heart of the Compassionate Communities Initiative is consulting with the community, co-producing ideas and initiatives, linking existing services together and using volunteers to make them sustainable in the long term. By working together, a compassionate community can help a dying person and their family and friends get the support and care they need, and to share more light-hearted moments with the community at large. For compassion, for people, for living.
Thank you. I think that's amazing work that you guys are doing, and I'm sort of really interested in how do you get the communities involved? I mean, you set up in different areas, but how do you get the impetus and the drive going when you're talking about? Do you want to?
So it's quite hard because a lot of people are very interested in what we do, and I can't tell you how many times they've said keep us updated. So it's just a case of constantly banging on doors, going to as many groups and organisations as possible, getting funding. That's the main thing. It is just me, so everything else is volunteers. And the success here, and I hope Nadine, you don't mind me saying that we're hoping to work together very soon. We've been emailing recently. We've had a number of meetings, and we're hoping to get some Walking for Health partnership walks off the ground. So it's a case of just not giving up. Community development takes a long time, we know, but just today I was thinking we just need that nugget of someone saying, well, okay, we'll come in with you. The consultation events are great because we look for a theme. So every time I go and talk to a group, there's random things that people want, and I manage their expectations by saying, just because you tell me this, we're not going to suddenly be able to do all of these things. But for instance, in Banstead, we're a little bit further ahead. What kept coming up was there's lots to do in the day, but there's nothing in the evenings, there's nothing sociable. You go home 5 o'clock, it's very lonely. So we started a book club, which is just getting off the ground now, and that sort of filled the gap for the social side of things and being in the evening as well. So it's early days, but we're getting there. We're slowly building up our connections, and there's people that we keep warm. So I know there's groups and clubs I talk to, and I'm not going to go away, and eventually we'll be able to do something together, hopefully. That sounds threatening, doesn't it? I didn't mean that to sound threatening.
Thank you very much. Just one other question was that how are you interacting with the community services and general practice in itself? Because obviously they are, hubs for populations to come to. So I was just wondering, how do you use them to be able to spread the word a little
I might
more?
pull you in here, actually, Zoe. So me on the ground, obviously we have our clinical nurse specialists who are out and about, so they have the contacts with the GP surgeries. And for me and what I do, that's the most important thing, that they know what we're doing. Everybody's very busy people, but the word can get out to them. But I think on a higher level in the hospice, I don't know if you've got something to add to that, Zoe.
I think as an organisation, as I said, we're looking to reach more people. So I think it is about building our clinical relationships and our relationships with our GP colleagues, because we offer amazing, outstanding care to people with specialist palliative care needs as they approach the end of their life. But actually, there are a lot of people that would benefit from this sort of support, and I think it's working together to access those people and show them what's on offer, really.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Before they go, any questions from the audience around compassionate communities? Because I think this is a great thing for the Borough of Kingston to be able to support. Any questions from members of the public? No? So can we just join together to just thank them again? Thank you very much. So I'm going to be the roving mic. So have you got questions around the presentations that you've had from myself, Neil, Sarah, or Tonya? You want to get a little bit of clarity around what we've talked about tonight? Or any questions to do with the CCG business, and for anything to do with the last financial year? Any comments or questions? Richard, I'll just come to you.
First of all, can I say thank you for a very interesting meeting. It's been more than well worth coming, so thank you very much indeed for that. I've got two questions, if I may. The first one really relates to the highlighting, you won't be surprised to hear, in connection with diabetes, because I'm the chair of the Kingston branch of Diabetes UK. And the links with that and social prescribing and some of the areas that we've been hearing about from our friends here from the hospice are really, really very important indeed, I think. What I find so worrying really is the lack of referrals that the diabetes support group, is actually receiving through from GP surgeries. Now, that isn't always the case. We had the village surgery in New Malden did a big event and put on a display. The Holmwood surgery equally in New Malden have done a very good job, and lots of people have come forward from that particular route. But I think it's right to say that we'd like more doctors' practices to actually pick up on this, because I can tell you that just today I've heard that the third of our 12 regular members, and they are sort of semi-regulars as that's concerned, with our exercise class that we run on a Tuesday morning, have actually been able to halve their diabetic medications in the last 12 months. And I think that's very exciting, and I think it has implications for others. So my question really is what more can we do to try and get the message through doctors' practices?
So there was a second question, was there, Richard? Or?
Yeah, my second question actually relates to patient participation groups. I was fortunate enough to be here last week where Tonya gave really a very informative presentation about what was happening in terms of South West London CCG and how that was going to take further forward. The disappointing part of that was that there wasn't representation from more of the GP practices. And my question is there more that the CCG can be doing to encourage active participation groups? Because it seems to me in the future, in the way that the structure is going to work out in the future, they're going to play an even more important role than they do at the moment.
Thank you. So if I take your first question and then I'll ask my colleagues or even colleagues in the audience who are actually governing body members. Around the lack of referrals from GP surgeries, I think that quite often, and I know this is no excuse at all, is that GPs tend to be quite overburdened with the amount of work that's coming through and trying to think of every single thing to do with each individual patient as to what referral pathways there are, what support services there are out in the community is really quite difficult to keep all in your mind when you're actually dealing with maybe 2 or 3 different things for a diabetic patient as well that you're trying to come to terms with. So I think Connected Kingston is a brilliant way of being able to try and provide some way of being able to highlight it. I do think that there are other ways that we can do it, and it might be worthwhile working with you, Richard, to try and find ways within the communities and general practice itself to be able to help promote that. And it may well be coming down to something very simple. In every diabetic patient has an annual health check from general practice, and so why don't we add that as part of the annual health check, saying just a quick message saying, have you heard of Diabetes UK? And this is these are the contact numbers. So there are ways of being able to do it. So I'm quite happy to work with you, Richard, over to try and come up with a solution for that. I don't know whether there's any other colleagues in the audience that want to add anything for that. No. Okay. The other question around PPG representation from general practice. So if I can just get the question clear in my mind, that how do you get the way of being able to get public engagement around general practices for patients for their health needs? So I think that going forward, we do need to make sure that's really strong, because it is a gap. We've tried over many years different ways of being able to do it, and we haven't got it right. And I do think that we do need to work probably with our borough colleagues much more closely to try and work out ways of being able to tap into patient cohorts around the borough to be able to then give us really informative feedback going forward. So I think that there are elements around the general practices PPGs themselves that could be developed. But again, it's usually very, very few patients want to be involved. I remember when I was trying to set one up in my local practice, and I didn't get one. I think I got one person interested, and we sent flyers out, and we tried as much as we could. So I think there's got to be a much more coordinated cross-borough approach to this rather than individual practice approaches. Phil, did you want to say anything about it?
You're absolutely right, Naz, that it's difficult to get people engaged in this way. I think we've got to think differently around social media and things like that. The difficulty with social media is there is a real time commitment in managing it at a practice level. I think perhaps the primary care networks may be the centre for better engagement in the future.
Yeah, so that might be one way of being able to do it. Sorry, sir. Is this on the same subject or? Yeah.
The basis and strategies of any project to be done needs strategies.
Yes.
And strategies depend on the statistics, on the number of the health disorder, on both aspect, preventive and curative, and also the association of all aspect of the community, beginning from the family, primary school, secondary school, plus the community leader of the association in the area. And also we have to know the growth rate of each area, and according to this strategy, we can get action to how to manage each one as alone. For example, when they put the strategy for the smoking, when they prevent smoking in the closed area, the number of the cancer of the lung reduced to the 50%. But as regard anything without strategy, it means failure. That's why, whether it's the subject or according to the strategy, you would get action, the one which is more action, and all the sector of the community have to share. And there is something I want
Do you mind introducing yourself, sir?
What?
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Elan.
No. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
something important I wanted about the health in UK. Most of the people, they don't know only the GP. GP is the first step in the health structure. And the other section of the health, no one knows the skeleton of the health services in the UK. We have GP, general hospital, specialized hospital, sub-specialized hospital, pharmacy, care home, research home. When a defect happens, all of these sections are responsible for any defect happen in the health. And the important thing, we have to associate all the community leaders in any health action.
Thank you, sir. I don't think I could agree more, because I think that's the way of direction of travel as regards trying to get everyone working together and actually not seeing it in isolation. I mean, our trust colleagues are here, our community colleagues are here, general practices are here, and what we're trying to do is trying to find ways of actually all working together for the single patient and also making sure that the strategies are aligned. So thank you. Yeah, sorry. Yep. Okay. So yes, Catherine.
Thank you. I was just going to come back in terms of Catherine Yates, the governing body nurse member for Kingston CCG. I was just going to come back in terms of looking at sort of that wider engagement. General practice nurses, I'm sure, would be very keen to have a conversation with you across the practices about ensuring that there's some good joined up thinking about opportunities here and in terms of what they do and kind of what you do and how that can connect up in a more effective way. And I'm sure that there are ways that we could try and open up that conversation. That may well have happened previously, but there's always opportunities to come back and look at that in a different way. So I'd be certainly happy to make some contact with you about see if there's opportunities to have a discussion further about that. So I just wanted to just put that there.
Thank you, Richard. It was great to be able to talk to you last week about our work. But one of the things I'm very, very enthusiastic about is our opportunity to rethink about how we engage with the population, not just on a patient level. I think patient participation groups are really important, but it's actually how do we engage with our population and actually not lose some of the benefits we've had as a CCG, that really sort of very frontline relationship we've had with population, with patient participation groups. We are setting up it sounds terrible, but another forum, a borough engagement forum, and we would like people like yourselves, we've talked about actually a task and finish group, getting the most out of there. And I don't think there's one answer, is there? So there is something around things like this. Face-to-face is really important because actually we have proper conversations. Social media is really important, but as you say, it needs some support. And the CCG can support practices in that kind of field. We've got some very good social media experts. So it's actually looking at the whole offer and actually how do we make sure that our reach goes as far as we possibly can into our communities. So, and looking at those opportunities when other people are talking to communities, actually what messages can we also share through other pieces of work. It doesn't always have to be about one topic, does it? So I think we've got a real opportunity to reset our approach, building on our existing structures, but also improving.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, can you introduce yourself, please? Thanks.
Yes, I'm Patricia Turner. I'm the CEO at Kingston Voluntary Action, and we're part of the Connected Kingston family very much. And just picking up on Claire, point about getting engaged, and part of Connected Kingston is actually to train frontline staff and actually working with GP practices and their frontline staff, because that's where conversations go on, and training them with the support of Connected Kingston as a tool to empower them to share that with people that they come into contact every day. Because as we said, a lot of issues are not medical issues, they're social issues, going back to bereavement and things like that. But I think with diabetes, if your practice managers, your reception staff know that there is a diabetes club locally, then they can share that too. So so that we all become signposters in that sense, not relying on GPs to know everything, because we know what their pressures are.
Thank you. Any other questions for our panel members here? No? Okay. I would like to thank Tonya, Sarah and Neil for this evening. I'd really like to thank Matt and Tara for arranging the presentations, and again our stand colleagues who've been here tonight supporting the AGM. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a very good evening. Thank you.